Her body trembled as she moved toward me, left leg limping, toes dragging along the tiled floor as she struggled to remain on her feet. Blue veins ran along her cheeks and forehead as her gray eyes stalked me. I backed away, attempting to move faster as she leaned in closer. Her mouth opened. Blood pooled out as her razor-sharp teeth reflected off the overhead lights. Her jaws clamped together as she leaned into my neck. I held her back. She attempted to bite me again, opening her mouth wider. Placing my hand on her forehead, I pushed her away from my neck. My feet slipped in the pool of blood under my feet. Latching onto her lower jaw, I snapped it off as I slid down to the floor. My body jolted back to reality as my friends hovered around. "Samantha, are you okay?" My eyes darted around the mall as crowds formed at the checkout counter. "We have to get out of here. It's not safe." "What are you talking about?" "I saw it happen. They were dead. They were all dead." "Oh my God. This bitch is losing it?" Catherine mumbled as she looked around the store. "Come on." Rebecca grabbed hold of my arm. "I'll take her outside. You guys finish up and meet us out front." She escorted me out of the mall, reassuring me that everything was all right. Pushing open the glass door, we walked out into the sunlight. My eyes closed as the warmth penetrated my flesh. I leaned up against the brick wall as more people entered the store. "Things are going to get bad." Rebecca walked over and leaned up against the wall next to me. "What did you see?" Her eyes widened as I ran through the events. "When is this supposed to happen?" "I don't know, but I was here. I was attacked here." She wrapped her arms around me. "It's okay." "Well, if it isn't sickly sight." Paul plopped down on the couch next to me. He thrust his face close to mine and widened his eyes. "Can you see me? Can you see what I'll become?" I pushed him away as he laughed. "Leave her alone," Sean said as he sat in the recliner. "Oh, come on. Your sister sees things. She needs to get some help." I removed myself from the couch and ran out the room. Sitting at the dining room table, I leaned my head on my knuckles and embraced the silence. My mother had the sight. My grandmother had it as well. No one ever believed them. Taunted, humiliated, and discarded. It drove them mad. Both of them left this world broken. I refused to let the same thing happen to me. "Are you all right?" "No. Why couldn't they pass this shit on to you?" "Apparently I'm not feminine enough." Sean pulled out the chair next to me and sat down. "I know this is hard. No one believes me." "Ido." He placed his hand on top of mine and smiled. "Zombie apocalypse. I never said they were zombies. They just weren't alive. Isn't that what zombies are? Dead who come back to life." I tilted my head as I tried to find another word to describe them, but my tongue failed me. "Yo," Paul said as he ran in the room. "They just reported on the news. Some guy broke out of the hospital. He's supposed to be really sick." He leaned into me and whispered in my ear, "Maybe he'll bite someone. Knock it off." Sean grabbed him by his arm and dragged him out of the kitchen. "I can't believe I'm here." "It's a big day for Sean. Of course you're here." Rebecca pulled out her cell phone and snapped a few pictures of herself. "I might do a live stream tonight on the event." I rolled my eyes and looked around the mall. Sean received an award a few weeks ago for helping an elderly couple who were being mugged. The locals decided to honor him with their own event at, of all places, the mall. The crowd poured in from the parking lot as the clock struck 6 p.m. The MC gathered everyone on stage, stood at the microphone, and welcomed everyone to the event. Promising not to keep us too long, he pulled out a sheet of paper and began reading. After 15 minutes, the majority of the crowd tuned him out. My eyes drifted toward the red exit signs hanging over the doors. Trapped in the middle of the room, I needed to figure out the best way to get out of here if something happened. Rebecca brushed against my shoulder, trying to get me to focus on the event. Sean walked up on the stage as the crowd applauded. He kept his speech brief and hurried back to the front of the crowd as the elderly couple walked toward the podium. "Hey, watch yourself." I turned around. A couple of men scuffled as someone pushed through the crowd. "What was that?" "Not sure." A scream broke through the chatter as everyone turned toward the back of the mall. Broken glass crashed against the silence as a group of employees ran out of the back room. She walked out behind them, blood pouring from her mouth. Blue veins penetrated her face, her gray eyes reflecting off of the white-tiled floor. She lunged at the crowd as another ran out of the back room. Two more appeared. Trampling feet and screams collided as the MC jumped off the stage, knocking over the microphone stand. I ran toward the stage, my eyes peering through the crowd, looking for Sean. Rebecca grabbed hold of my arm and pulled me toward the door. The crowd hovered in front, blocking the entrance as more people crowded behind us. The sun shone through the cracked door as everyone pushed their way through the exit. Spotting Sean, I broke away from Rebecca, grabbed hold of his arm, and pulled him toward the door. A man moved toward us. A scream leapt from his lips as his body stiffened, trembling as his blue eyes turned gray. Sean grabbed my hand. We ran toward the van. Rebecca fumbled with the keys before finally getting it in the lock. We climbed inside and slid the door closed as he charged toward us, banging his head into the metal. Moving to the other side of the van, we watched as everyone scurried through the parking lot, trying to survive long enough to find shelter. Sean grabbed the keys from Rebecca's hand, jumped into the front seat, revved up the engine, and sped out of the parking lot. The road blocked, he managed to make his way to the shortcut home, down a winding path, before almost crashing into a car as we made it back to the main road. He sped down our street, slamming on the brakes, and making the sharp turn into our driveway. We ran inside the house, locking all the doors and windows. Rebecca grabbed the remote from the coffee table and turned on the television. Emergency broadcast flashed on the screen as the reporter stood outside the grocery store. Authorities are still looking for the man who escaped from the hospital yesterday evening. According to reports, he fell ill after returning from a trip. Unable to identify the cause of his illness, he was placed under quarantine in a separate wing of the hospital. He escaped last night. We're getting reports of people being attacked all over the state, the broadcaster said as she questioned the reporter. Are these events connected? As of right now, we don't have any definite answers. But for everyone's safety, authorities are asking everyone to stay inside. Oh my God! Rebecca placed her hand on her chest as she collapsed onto the couch. This is what you saw. I lowered my eyes to the floor. So what now? We stay inside until it's over. My head pounds to the rhythm of my pulse and I see dark stars creeping in at the edges of my vision. I try to steady my breathing so that I don't pass out. My clothes cling to cold sweat. Bile is finding its way up into my throat, but I can't swallow it down because of all the cotton inside of my mouth. I swear it's lined with cobwebs. I feel the sticky strands pulling my throat closed. I don't want to die like this. Not now. The tangled ball of upturned legs laying in the middle of the bedroom appears motionless. I feel like I've been watching it for hours, waiting for it to twitch. But it never does. It's the third one I've killed this week, and my nerves won't be able to survive another one. I stare at it through my tunnel vision haze as I sit on the cold terrazzo floor, my back against the wall. God, I hate those things, the fangs, the unblinking eyes, the plump hairy bodies. But most of all, I hate the legs. I hate the way they splay out across the wall or the ceiling just before pouncing. Sometimes I can hear the big ones scurry across the floor during the silence between television commercials. That's when I simply call it a night and go hyperventilate through a paper bag until I pass out. Asleep. Tonight might be one of those nights. My ravaged nerves plead for me to close my eyes, just for a moment. But I know that if I do, that ball of legs will somehow untangle itself and scuttle off into a dark corner to torment me another day. The tingling sensation in my hand reminds me that I still have my shoe in a vice grip. I let go and flex my stiff fingers. After a few more deep breaths, I gather the courage to move. I stand up and back out of the bedroom, making sure I don't look away from the mass of spindly legs, because if I do, it'll crawl away. I leave the light on and the door wide open for the same reason. I'll try to deal with it in the morning. Tonight I'll be on the couch. I round the corner to the bathroom and put my mouth to the sink faucet. The tepid tap water tastes like heaven. I look up at my pimpled face in the mirror. The yellow speckles on the glass make me look like I have reversed freckles. My face always breaks out after a panic attack, and picking at it calms me down. I focus on a mass of acne that erupted next to my nose last week, and I pinch off the top layer of scab. It's definitely getting bigger, probably infected. The sharp sting distracts my thoughts from wandering back into the bedroom, to the ball of legs. A yellow head forms at the tip, and I squeeze it with my forefingers, releasing a discharge of fresh spackle at the mirror. I push hard on both sides of the purple cyst until sticky yellow custard percolates into the sink. Pain shoots into my sinus, and I grip the edges of the sink. My eyes shut so hard I see a kaleidoscope of lights beneath my lids. The whole side of my cheek throbs, and there's an ache deep inside my face. Definitely infected. I press a wad of toilet paper onto the angry sore and contemplate driving to a clinic in the morning. I actually feel the inflammation pushing against my fingers. Man, this is really bad. I pull the paper away to assess the damage, and the tip of an ingrown hair comes out with it. Weird place for a hair. But then I recall hearing stories of teeth and fingernails growing inside people's bodies. Must be why it hasn't healed after a week. I pinch the end of the stiff black hair and take a deep breath. I close my eyes and prepare for pain. It's just like pulling off a Band-Aid, right? I grit my teeth and yank. The pain is unreal. I squint through watery eyes to see how much flesh got pulled out with it. But the hair is still protruding there, about an inch longer now, but still there. I feel spasms deep in my sinus, and the hair begins to slowly draw itself back into the swollen pimple. I quickly grab the end of it, and it pulls against me. I feel it bend at an angle under my fingertips. Gotta stay calm. With my free hand, I fumble through the medicine cabinet for tweezers. I pinch them at the base of the hair and pull 2 more inches out. The base of it is thicker and coarser than any hair I've ever seen. Another part of it bends, and the whole length of the strand twitches wildly like a tiny black skeleton finger. No, 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 this can't be real. I push my thumb into my mouth, against the underside of the cyst, and the flesh there moves. Whatever's in there has to come out, so I press hard with my thumb while pulling with the tweezers. Another thick hair works its way out of the wound, then two more. Then, I see something wet and black deep inside, with tiny unblinking orbs that seem to look at me from the mirror. It's one of them. My tweezers are trembling so badly that they lose their grip, and the thing begins slipping back into the hole in my face. No. I plunge the tweezers into the cyst and scrape at the insides. The pain is making me woozy, but I keep digging. The tweezers drop from my sweaty fingers, so I continue digging with my fingernails. The thing is so slick and sticky that I can't grab a hold of it. I feel it clawing further into my sinus. I can't let it go deeper. I keep pressing my thumb against the inside of my mouth until it tears through the outer layer of the cyst. A tangle of black legs pushes out with my thumb. The spider unfolds from the raw cavity in my face. The legs splay across the side of my head as its black body slides from the crevice. And all I can do is tremble as the nightmare unfolds in the mirror. Do something. I'm going to die. I grip the sides of the sink and heave myself into the mirror. The spider is faster, and it scurries up into my hair. I'm dizzy and I see stars. The spider continues down the back of my head, and I feel its awful legs clamp onto my neck. I can't move. I can only brace myself with the sides of the sink and stare down at the kaleidoscope of glass and gore. I still can't move as the pulsating mass of sticky yellow custard splits into 1,000 tiny legs, each one scampering from its egg sac and up my arms. I'm jolted away from the horrible sight by a sharp sting at the back of my neck, and I gasp for breath. The spider loosens its grip and crawls under my shirt where it's dark and moist with sweat. The searing venom burns its way down my spine. My body becomes weak and rigid. I only make it a couple of steps into the hallway before collapsing. I lay on my stomach, paralyzed, with my head turned toward the bedroom. I watch with unblinking eyes as the ball of upturned legs laying in the middle of the floor untangles itself and crawls toward me. I hear the legs scuttling across the tile in the silence between my heartbeats. In the Neolithic period of the Mediterranean, on the north coast of the African continent along the sea, a 19-year-old woman named Basha lived. She had one child and was pregnant with the second. Although both fathers were gone, one died of infection from a broken leg, and the other never returned from a fishing voyage. She lived in a medium-sized community with about 100 other people. Their main trade was fishing, but they also grew wheat and even had some olive trees, and a storehouse was guarded by their local chief. Basha lived with her mother and one other older woman who had no living relatives, and she liked her life. One day, this pregnant young woman woke up craving dates. She did not want to sell anything to buy some, but luckily, since she knew of a grove south of her village that was mostly unattended, she left her baby girl with the elder woman and started walking to the grove of date trees. By midday, she was growing tired and sat down in some grass to take a rest. She did not have the foresight to bring any food with her since she had planned to eat her fill at her destination. Just some wild fruit wine which she contained in a wrapped wooden container tied to her side, which she drank now. Resigning herself to a short nap, Basha was sure that afterwards she would have enough strength to make it the remaining distance. When the young woman woke up, she found it to be mid-afternoon. Unhappy and surprised to find it too late in the day to complete her journey, she frustratedly started to head back. But past a bundle of overgrown trees, she noticed something new. It was a glossy black cave nestled into the coastal forest overgrowth. She wondered how she could have missed it before, since it seemed to be in her path. The seemingly damp surface appealed to her, as she was extra thirsty from the wine, and she made her way over to it, hoping to find a small spring or something of the like. Basha found what she was looking for and knelt down near its opening, drinking from a trail of water which came from deeper in the cave. When she had her fill, she looked up and spotted something within the depths. There in the darkness was a pair of yellow eyes. At first Basha froze, thinking it was some big cat or other devilish creature ready to give her a hard time. But soon she realized that she was not just frozen with fear. She really couldn't move at all. Basha began to panic. She did not know how much time passed as she was paralyzed there. Only a few things in her frame of vision, one of them the creature at the back of the cave. As her eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, she was able to make out a vague silhouette, on the head of which its eerie eyes remained staring. It did not move a lot, but when it did, it was very unnerving to her. It reminded her of the cockroaches which would bury into the sand or dirt near her home. However, as she stared, she found it to be closer to the outline of a very tall man. The sun started lowering in the sky. Without warning, her body suddenly jerked, lurching forward all at once. She was taking steps into the cave, her world growing darker, her arms limp at her sides. Suddenly she tripped on something, and unable to catch herself, Basha fell onto her face and belly. She worried for her unborn child, but hoped it was early enough along and not too bad of a fall. Something spindly started to seep underneath her body. A wave of anxiety coursed through her at the realization that they were very, very long fingers. They began to wrap around her torso, their multiple joints and weirdly moldy material creating a cacophony of fleshy and pinching sensations beneath the young woman's form. Finally, they completed their journey and lifted her into the air. As she was picked up, she was sure that she would be eaten. At first, Basha believed it to be some kind of monstrous ape because of the human-like eyes and hands, since she just could not think of anything else in the animal kingdom that would fit its description. But that did not explain her paralysis, so then she thought she had fallen into a snake den, and it was just many snakes who wrapped around her and somehow afflicted her with their venom when she was not looking. However, all her will to make sense of this situation vanished as soon as the creature tilted her toward him. Before Basha was a human or something in the vague shape of one who appeared to be stretched out and distorted horrifically. Its neck and head were elongated and the skin everywhere on its body appeared to be decaying. Its chest heaved up and down unevenly and its legs were folded beneath its form. They looked to be too skinny, and as Basha looked more she found that they were twisted and bent in many places, maybe even unusable or disconnected from the rest of it. What she had originally believed to be yellow eyes was not. They were two glowing patterns on its forehead. Its eyes were beneath those, and they were closed at first. Slowly it began to open them. White revealed itself, then more white cracked with red and yellow, and then the tiniest speck of dark black. Beneath that a slit in its face cracked open, revealing a set of human teeth too small for the gaping mouth. Then it was as though Basha was falling. Although visually she did not see any movement, it felt like her body was gradually then rapidly plummeting, careening downward. There was whispering, sounds which were very unfamiliar to her and which burned painfully in her ears. They bounced around the walls and changed shape, becoming a set of strange outlines which appeared to tell a story. She failed to make sense of it because there were so many unknown figures. An animal creature walking around in the woods, then a golden calf stomping on its head. She saw the yellow pattern she confused for eyes and watched its decrepit body crawl off. By this time, Basha thought she was dead. She mourned over the baby in her belly, whose womb would also be its grave. The thing before her appeared to hear her thoughts. The bizarre vision ceased, and she was dropped onto the ground, and she passed out. When she awoke, it was gone. Basha was still convinced she was dead, and was calmly intrigued to find the afterlife so similar to her previous life. It took her wandering out of the cave, through the sparse woods back to her home, and into her house for her to finally be convinced that she was still on Earth. The old woman carrying her baby was surprised to see her. She informed her that it was the next day and she had been sure Basha was not coming back. She sat down and took her baby into her arms, cradling and kissing her child. Tears streamed down her face, and the old woman concernedly asked her what was wrong and what happened. She found herself unable to talk, so the old woman left to get her mother. They returned together and her mother kissed and hugged her, rocking both her and her grandchild in loving arms. The only choked words Basha could manage through the tears was that she was on her way to the date grove and got lost in a cave. And that was all she ever said on the subject. Months passed. Basha's swollen belly had grown to the brink. She was healthy despite the absurd trials that had occurred earlier in the pregnancy, and was due soon. She was hoping for a boy. She considered the events that passed to be a hallucination incurred onto her by the water she drank at the mouth of the cave. She figured that it was dirty or poisoned, and that is what gave her such a strange nightmare. Ever since that night she had been different, her mother finding her more careful and reserved, whereas before she would have to chastise her for wandering off or being unobservant. Now she needed some light encouragement even for attending bonfires or visiting a home. She was just glad that her daughter was alive and had learned this difficult life lesson, which in her opinion most did not live to learn, that the world could be dangerous and strange. When it was time to birth the baby, those who would help deliver it had hope that it would be an easy one. Basha was still young and had already carried one child very smoothly, so they all had faith that she would make it through the second time. Her second baby came out a healthy and strong boy. She nursed both of them, and treated her son as though he were her own. It was only a week until one night, while it was sleeping, Basha noticed something with a painful horror. On his forehead was the pattern that she had seen all that time before, yellow and unmistakable. She fearfully turned away, and just in time, since she could feel the edge of its hypnotism in her bones. She did not dare sleep that night, only waiting. Just before dawn broke, she left her home with her newborn in her arms. She walked to the date grove, and halfway there, once again spotted the cursed wet alcove that never used to be found. Fighting the urge to flee, Basha kept her head lowered and walked to it. All she saw with her head tilted down and her eyes pinned firmly to the floor was its mangled legs. She left its baby at the mouth of the cave and never returned. When we look into the darkness, our deepest selves understand that something looks back. Anthony looked out the window as midnight struck, looked into a dark so crushing that it felt tangible, encompassing, stifling, toxic. The thing looking back at him, its grotesque, teeth-filled mouth, scowled more than smiled. Soon its hunger would end. Anthony smiled back and thought, "We'll see whose hunger will be sated this night." The thing of the darkness, whose very existence had struck a fear so primal into the hearts of such varied creatures, that it itself knew not the feeling, recoiled unexpectedly, not understanding what had caused this reaction. Unknowingly, it now knew fear's strangling grasp. Before, Anthony was anything but typical. He always thought himself unique, set apart, viciously intelligent, decidedly smart, a man among men. He thought the world unappreciative of what he contributed to it. The world, and fairly so, thought him average. Anthony therefore thought the measuring stick was broken. His thoughts on the matter were reinforced by the rejection letters he'd recently gotten from all the big and small publishing houses for his novels. Anthony knew his works were without equal, speaking to realities and fantasies, through a written medium so good that people should count themselves fortunate to live at the same time as an author so rarely gifted. Letter after letter came back, however, and Anthony became increasingly paranoid that somewhere, some floundering author would find his stories discarded by these blind editors and use his words to break out into the writing world. He started to research the copyright laws to ensure he could fight these battles that he was sure would come. From his small town, he wondered how he'd even find out that his stories were out there. Can a writer become famous, recognized, and paid with his stories without him knowing? Yes, he answered himself. Anthony, though, could not hide the deep shame he felt at having been rejected. The ever-lessening ashamed yet sensible part of him told him that he just was not that good, and should just accept that and carry on being a good average guy with an average job, average girl, average family. Average life, and die being not remembered as nothing but average. As he was rejected, Anthony rejected this notion of obscure mediocrity. He was more and more for this world, and he'd make the world know it, until it felt it in the very deepest parts of its deepest oceans, till it resounded from the highest parts of the tallest mountains. Anthony would be remembered when he was no more, and lauded while he was here. He'd just have to give them all a little nudge in the right direction. It should not take much, he thought. His work was of immeasurable worth, a gift to this pallid world. Being a small-town boy, Anthony was always confused as to why the folks around were so cliquish. It was not like they had many a varied option. Being, however, a boy in a town he moved to as a young teen, in the middle of Middle America, being the only black family for as far as the eye could see, and the only Trinidadians for as far as bird could fly. Well, that made it a tad more difficult. Anthony's parents were determined, however, to have a different American story. His dad, as the town doctor, was liked well enough, and his mom as the town dentist brought smiles, not just owing to her trade. Anthony was accepted well enough, but the divisions between the other young adults and himself was more owing to him than them. Anthony lived mostly in his mind, in his books, in his sci-fi movies. He was an expert introvert. He really then just never fit in. Anthony desperately wanted to not just fit in, but to be recognized as the most important element in any grouping. And Anthony felt that this was not asking too much. The world, however, did not seem to agree. Anthony had been back to Trinidad with his parents a number of times, back to his rural village to the south of the island, and like them, was glad to get back home to their nice house in their nice town. On one visit, however, unknown to his parents, Anthony had met up with the village witch doctor. Anthony never knew that the Abaya man had sought him out. The rich little village boy who lived foreign was reserved and noted to be into stories of fantasy and fiction. Anthony's family story and his odd ways were well known in the village. The witch doctor understood that here lay fertile ground for his demons to plant their seeds, migrate and multiply in a whole new country. The Abaya man had met up with Anthony and seemingly granted a small favor. The next day Anthony got a call from a big magazine that he'd won a short story competition. All it had cost Anthony was $1,000, negligible, as the prize money was $5,000 and Anthony would be interviewed and featured in the magazine. Anthony thought himself on his way to recognition. The witch doctor knew Anthony's soul was on its way to hell. The witch doctor was aware that he no more controlled the demons than the olden people who danced around their fires controlled the rain. He was a channel through which the demons came, and he was granted longevity, and by his consultations with willing village folks who paid very well for his services, prosperity. All it had cost him was his soul. When the demons came, they needed fertile ground in which to grow, to rest, to wait. Their growing field was the unsuspecting soul of a victim. Yes, the demons granted favors. Little things that led to little bigger things, but never enough to make their consorts not ask for more. The demons had a practiced trade. They gave just enough to make people need them desperately, hungrily, greedily, until giving to the demon was like breathing. All the while, the person would think that it was the witch doctor who granted them the favors, not knowing that the deal was now between them and the devil, until there was nothing of them left, nothing left to give. Then a master demon, a demon prince, would come from hell and would take over and walk this world in the shell of the former person. It was a formula that had worked forever. His parents were shocked when Anthony told them that he'd like to go to Trinidad on his own, to visit family and friends. His parents had always thought him too reserved, too shut in, for a young man, so were glad when he offered the suggestion. And the recent events in town had everyone on edge. The disappearances were more than concerning. Kids Anthony's age, one or two that he knew. Maybe the time away was ideal. When Anthony arrived to his native village, he followed the expected routine. Met all he was supposed to, made the usual rounds, laughed at the oft-told jokes about when he was young, about his parents, before they made the bold move to migrate. He followed the usual patterns until he could get away on his own. This time, however, he sought out the witch doctor, or so he thought. The doctor was waiting for him. Anthony's request was small. He just wanted to be the most famous writer ever. The witch doctor, whatever little piece of humanity was left in him, shuddered. The Abaya man had been born with the sight, the ability to see demons and see them attached to people. The more the people fed the demon, the more the demon grew, resilient in their evil. He saw now the demon that wrapped around Anthony, whispering in his ear. And even the witch doctor wanted to scream and run away. He'd never seen a demon so strong. What he did not know was that Anthony had asked ever-growing little favors. And Anthony kept giving of his soul. And then, when that was not enough, Anthony had decided that other souls should pay his price. The witch doctor knew the look of a demon fed by murder. And this demon looked more fed than any he'd ever seen. His last human shred wanted to turn the boy away. But the witch doctor knew it was too late for him to take such a righteous stance. He was as lost as Anthony, and never able to see the demon that whispered in his witch doctor's ear. The boy had come to ask why his favors were no longer being granted. He had done what was asked of him. The witch doctor told the boy that sacrificing strangers fed little favors. Sacrificing a loved one would satisfy the greatest need. Anthony knew then that this was his role to play. The tragic orphan would make for a better biography at the back of his novels in any event. Anthony made up his mind, paid the witch doctor for his consultation, only $10,000, and left. The two whispering demons smiled. Now! So yes, Anthony looked out the window, and what he really saw was not the grotesque creature of the dark, but the reflection of the demon wrapped around him, mouth close to his ear. Behind him lay the decapitated, dismembered and decomposing bodies of his parents. Through the mail chute was acceptance letter after acceptance letter from every major publishing house, anxious to give this tremendously and uniquely talented and gifted new author his taste of fame. But every letter remained in place, untouched, unopened. Anthony was no longer home to open them. A prince had taken up residence in Anthony's shell. and even Anthony's whispering demon was afraid. The demon prince looked out at the new world and smiled. Tonight we begin. The onyx-shaded chapel towered to the heavens. The steeple silhouette eclipsed the nearest roadway and beyond. Newfound Belief Church. Location: Hope Road. Their motto was "Change the way your mind thinks about religion." The phrase sang from every billboard within a 20-mile radius. These folks were proud of their establishment, Bob thought. The church architecture mesmerized the mind. Business appeared lucrative. Bob paused to check for sweat stains under his cream dune t-shirt. Good to go. The sun sizzled on the pavement. Houston summers smothered the life out of you. Shouldn't be any cops hanging around church, Bob thought. Bob needed a spot to enjoy his joint peacefully before heading to the library. The librarian promised him the new David Mitchell book would be in today. It was titled Cloud Atlas. 6 intertwining stories, reincarnation, and oppression themes. And rumor had it Mitchell wrote in 6 different writing styles. Bob was ecstatic. Anything for a reprieve from the chaos at home. Bob recently turned 18. He awaited his college acceptance letter in the mail. The goal: to attend an out-of-state school. His parents fought nonstop, arguing about his younger brother's behavioral issues, about his mom's perceived schizophrenia. Bob inhaled his first hit when he noticed 2 men intently headed in his direction. "What are you doing on church property, young man? Is that marijuana?" Bob dropped the joint and darted off toward the library. A bum ankle restricted his speed. The 2 men gained ground on him faster than expected. Thud. Bob's face planted into the dry, crunchy ground. A mouthful of brittle dead grass got inhaled into his windpipe. "Tooey." Bob spit the earth out. "What the hell are you guys doing to me?" The 2 men wrestled Bob's arms behind his back. One wore a plain black suit, white dress shirt, and faded black tie, Travis. He was a deputy at Newfound Belief Church. The other man, Pope John, a black cassock with a black zucchetto fitted over his trimmed, white comb-over, his hands cracked and scaly from eczema. "We didn't have to travel far to find this one," Travis said to Pope John. "Yeah, recruits are showing up at our doorstep now," Pope John said. "Do you know you're trespassing on church property, numbskull?" Travis said. "I was walking to the library. I wasn't on your property," Bob said. "See if he has any more weed on him. He looks like a hoodlum. He needs the Lord," Pope John said. "Get your hands out of my pocket. I'm going to report you to the cops." Bob tried to wiggle free, but the grown man's strength outmatched his teenage muscles. "Are you now?" Travis held up an ounce bag of weed he pulled from Bob's pocket. "And how are you going to explain this? We have the sheriff on speed dial. He happens to be a prominent member of this church." "Let go of me, what do you want?" Bob said. The 2 men loosened their grip on Bob. "We can turn you in, or we'll make a deal with you." Bob wiped the grass and dirt from his shirt. "What deal?" "Become a member of the church," the Pope said. "What? That's it? I'm a member of your church. Now get your hands off me." "Hold your right hand out," Travis said. Bob reluctantly pushed his hand toward Travis. Travis revealed a large syringe from his pocket and loaded something inside the tip. "What is this? A black light stamp?" Bob said. "Hold still. This will only sting a bit." Bob began to resist the tighter Travis' grip became. "Hold still. It will only take a second." The Pope pulled his phone out and dialed the sheriff. Ringing, ringing, ringing. Okay. Get with it already," Bob said. What are you tagging me with? Travis stuck the syringe into Bob's skin, where his thumb met the back of his hand. God damn, what's your problem? That hurt. Bob rubbed his hand while he examined the tiny silver object under his skin. Step 1 of initiation is complete. Next, you come back tomorrow at the same time, and we will complete the process. If you tamper with the microchip, it will alert us. More importantly, it will notify the sheriff. The microchip is church property. You don't want to be known as a thief as well as a drug addict, do you? Don't mention anything to your parents either. You wouldn't want them to know the kind of trouble you've been getting into. Pope John said, My parents won't notice anything different about me. Bob thought. His mom and dad were consumed with blaming each other for their failing marriage. Bob went largely unnoticed most days. Walking to the library or reading at the library occupied most of his time. He recalled when his mom pulled a gun on his father and Bob had to run out of his house. The library provided refuge. Books became his escape. When he arrived at the library, he stumbled across The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Bob found himself wanting to visit the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, a place in the novel that housed a sanctuary of rare books. If Bob could live there, he could vanish along with all his problems. People lined up outside of the church. Bob walked to the end of the line when he felt someone tug his arm. Come with us. The man was wearing a black suit, white shirt, and faded black tie. Travis. Bob followed Travis past the line of devotees. Bob noticed a haziness in the people's eyes, a soulless disconnect. We need to validate the microchip's efficacy. Make sure you haven't tampered with anything. This way, Travis said, pointing down a long corridor with brown wooden doors every 6 feet or so. The Pope awaited Travis and Bob inside his chambers. A plethora of prominent figures decorated the office walls. There were photo ops with JFK, Andy Warhol, and Martin Scorsese. Bob saw a photo with the Pope and Bruce Springsteen. There was even one with Anne Rice. You know all of them? Bob asked. Yes, they're honorary members of the church. Their donations help fund our mission at the church, the Pope said. Enough of the small talk, please. Let's make sure your chip is online, Travis. Have you experienced abnormalities with the chip? Grogginess? Nightmares? Perverse thoughts? The Pope asked. What? No, just a lot of itching. And it feels like it is moving around in my skin. All is to be expected. So, your mental state is stable, you would say. The Pope said. Yes, I did dream of a giant Bible the other night, which I thought odd. It was the size of a grown man, kept rotating until I walked over and opened it. When I peeked inside, the words leaped off the page and started downloading into my brain. Bob said, Perfect. The upload is initiated. This process is simple. You give us 6 months of your devotion, and after the time window, if you don't feel the church is for you, you're free to walk. Travis said, 6 months? For smoking weed. Feels disproportionate. I didn't do anything to you. I was minding my own business, Bob said. Minding your own business on a property you don't own, Travis said. Bob stood up and slammed the chair into the Pope's desk. This is bullshit. What is the real purpose of this chip? Are all members required to get it? It simplifies our congregational mission statement. In the past, church attendees didn't truly process what religion symbolized. They attended a small percentage annually, but not enough for our message to connect. And what's that? Bob said. That our Lord is the only gateway to heaven. The Pope said. This chip resolves that. It uploads scripture, sermons, etc. directly to your cerebral cortex. In an expeditious time frame, people and you will reap the benefits of our religion, the Pope said. And might I add, another microchip benefit is an automatic 20% pre-tax deduction of your earnings. Your contribution will be donated directly to the church fund, enabling us to broaden our reach into the world. Travis said, "Seems a bit excessive if you ask me. Why don't you do it the way you've been doing it for the past 2,000 years? Bob said. Bob inched his way toward the chamber door. We're using technology to combat technology. With the advent of the internet, people are becoming more and more distracted. And it is only going to get worse," the Pope said. "So, you had scientists and engineers develop a high-tech microchip for a religion? Biologists as well. This chip is 20 to 30 years ahead of its time. DARPA developed technology for the military. We've previously worked with DARPA on some social experiments, and they were gracious enough to grant us access to the first-generation chips. There are a few hiccups to deal with, but overall, they're progressing satisfactorily," Travis said. "Hiccups like what?" Bob said. "Well, sometimes informational uploads become permanently downloaded to your cerebral cortex. To minimize this and other potential side effects, drug use is prohibited. Chemicals and mind-altering substances could compromise your neurotransmitters and disrupt neural connectivity," Travis said. Bob prodded at the chip, gauging the permanency of its implementation. "With more congregation funding, we can calibrate the microchip to connect us directly to God. This chip is the future of our church," Pope John said. F***CKU. This feels like some bullshit new wave MK Ultra mind control crap," Bob said. Bob picked at the protrusion in his hand and tried to loosen the metal scab with his fingernail. "Calm down. It's a minor sacrifice for a relationship with the Lord," the Pope said. "I don't want a relationship with your Lord. I want to leave. No one is holding you against your will. We can extract the microchip, but if you breach the agreement, we will also break ours. We know you're trying to get accepted into Brown University. English major, huh? I would hate for the sheriff to pick you up and you be in possession of enough marijuana perceived as intent to distribute. A university as prominent as Brown might have trouble seeing past that infraction," the Pope said. Bob's face turned the color of the holy wine. "I don't sell drugs. What are you talking about? Remove the microchip before our 6-month agreement is fulfilled and you'll know what we're talking about. Do we have an agreement or not?" the Pope said. Bob glared in disgust at the two men as he left the Pope's chamber, slamming the heavy door behind him. A few months after the microchip implant, Bob's parents, Donna and Ernest, began noticing behavioral changes in Bob. "Has Bob urged you to attend church lately?" Donna said. "He might have mentioned a few times," Ernest said. "You don't find that odd? He's always been an independent thinker. Now he's converting to organized religion. He even tucks his shirt in now. He's never done that," Donna said. "What I find stranger is him pressing me to go to the shooting range, persistently. He doesn't like guns," Ernest said. "He doesn't. His soul is peaceful. He only cares about books and writing. Maybe we should talk to him." Bob walks out of his room, his midnight blue polo tucked into his khaki pants. "Can one of you give me a ride to the church?" Bob said. "I'm sorry, Bob. I have a meeting in 15 minutes, Ernest said. "I can't either. I am meeting Helen for lunch on the other side of town." "I'm sorry, honey," Donna said. "Is everything okay with you, honey?" his mom asked. "Sure. Why wouldn't it be? You seem preoccupied. more than normal. And the Bible thing is not like you. You've been quoting scripture lately. There is nothing wrong with religion. It's just not something you've ever cared for. Let him find himself, Donna. He's still young. Ernest said. I am. I want to make sure he is okay. You always try to complicate things when I am just checking on our son. Donna said. He might need some space, that's Al. I need to go meet Helen. I'm late. Donna said as she grabbed her purse and stormed out the front door. Bob rolled his eyes. He went to his room to grab his backpack. I have one more joint, he remembered. Much needed. On the way to his weekly consultation, Bob pulled his lighter out and placed the flame on the tip of his joint. Ah! Bob tilted his head back and exhaled the white smoke and his stress toward the clouds. He found himself at peace again. His thoughts returned, but accompanying them was an unfamiliar head throb. His original thoughts were competing with his uploaded theological thoughts. Bob removed his iPod from his bag and pressed play. Duppy Conqueror boomed through his headphones. Bob Marley's lyrics liberated him. Pure message. Zero obligation to the movement. Ah, better. What is the church doing to people's psyches, he wondered. He needed more time to think. Bob detoured from the consultation and took a trip to the library. The librarian said she'd save him a copy of Jonathan Strange and Dr. Norrell. The book was checked out for months, but a copy finally came in. The book was about a period when magic no longer existed until two magicians proved that theory wrong and came along to help England in the Napoleonic Wars. Bob imagined he understood magic. He would change everything in his life. Church consultations wore down his brain. His parents' arguments made it hard for him to be happy. The library provided his only companionship. He needed change. When he finished at the library, Bob noticed the theological thoughts resurfaced. Coincidentally, the marijuana faded. What the hell, he thought. Are these uploads permanent? Bob's cell phone rang. Hello, Bob answered. We missed you at today's consultation. Everything okay? Travis said. Yes, I had some things to do. Bob said. That's not part of the agreement. The church comes first until the terms expire. Yeah, I know. I can be by in 30 minutes. See you then. Don't be late. The sheriff is here as well. He needs to speak to you. Screw these people, Bob thought. He rubbed the silicate glass object in his hand. It was almost fully embedded. Bob tightened the straps on his backpack, took the last hit off his joint and headed to church. Deputy, Pope, Sheriff, how are you? Bob asked. How are you, Bob? The sheriff asked. Couldn't be better, honestly. Scripture is downloading. Damn near know it by heart. That's great. We need to talk to you about your no-show today. Not only that, you're in violation of the substance abuse policy. Your chip report shows marijuana use today. Is that accurate? The deputy said. Yes, things have been rough at home. I needed a temporary escape to regain my sanity. Is this a problem? Bob said. It absolutely is a problem. For one, it's illegal. Two, it interferes with the neural uploads. Travis said. About those, how long did you guys upload take for completion? Bob asked. The three men looked at each other with uncertainty, unsure what to say. That's what I thought. I didn't come here to check in. Bob unzipped his backpack and rummaged through, feeling for the cold steel. He pulled out his father's freshly oiled Glock 21 pistol. He immediately pointed it at the sheriff. Make another move and I kill the deputy. And the Pope. Bob forced the three men into the corner of the Pope's chambers. Which one of you knows how to remove this? Bob nodded his head toward his microchip. That's the deputy's job. Budash, but we can't extract it. It's against church policy. Bang! Bob shot the sheriff's leg as the sheriff reached for his state-issued pistol. Bob grabbed the weapon from the sheriff's holster as the sheriff writhed in pain. I didn't want this to happen. I just want this chip out of my hand, Bob said. The Pope made a pressing motion with his hands. Bob, our agreement with you is not only with us three but with the Lord. Now I dictate the policy, numbskull. Extract this from my hand, and fast. Your sheriff needs medical assistance. The quicker the chip is removed, the quicker I call for help on my way out of here, Bob said. The extractor is in the Pope's desk, Travis said. Bob pressed the gun barrel into the deputy's temple. You have 3 seconds to get what you need. Let's go. Travis found the extractor and tried to steady his hands to connect with the microchip. The extractor clamped Bob's microchip and immediately popped free, hitting the floor with a clink. Bob reached for the microchip and placed it in his pocket. Bob's blood trickled onto the deputy, producing a one-tone Jackson Pollock painting on his wrist. We need to call for help. The sheriff is bleeding out, Travis said. I'll call when I walk out of this door. The story when the authorities ask is this: the sheriff accidentally shot himself in the leg while he was adjusting his gun holster. Plain and simple. Self-inflicted wound. From there, we all move on with our lives. If I ever see any of you again, I will expose this church, the microchip nonsense, and your exploitive agenda all over national news. Bob said. You'll pay for this, son, the Pope said. Bob removed the rounds from the sheriff's magazine and placed the pistol outside of the door. We'll see. Bob backed out of the chamber with the gun pointed at the 3 men before he paused. One last thing. Where is my bag of weed?